we've been talking to the public. Let's talk to our fellow cops, right? Our fellow first responders. What advice can you give these young officers?
Don't take things personal. We routinely got rocked and bottled in the housing projects. Routinely got, cursed at. They played a song F the Police by NWA like all the time. I never took it personal. For the grace of God, I've done something stupid because you can't let your anger cloud your judgment. I think I had one complaint in 35 years, and the complaint was BS. I never had like a personal complaint where somebody said I cursed. Because I never took it personal. People have cursed at me. They've thanked me later. I've had fights with people, and I shook their hand after and bought them, Burger King on the way to jail. If there's new people, you can't take things personal. If you do, you're not going to last a long time. You're going to get in trouble.
Today on Bets and Badges, we have the distinct honor and pleasure of reintroducing a person who has been an integral part of law enforcement leadership in South Florida, Chief Charles Nanney. How are you, sir?
Good, sir. Good afternoon.
Charles, you were recently inducted into the Florida Police Hall of Fame. Congratulations. First of all, tell us a little bit about it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. It was actually a great surprise because it kind of closes out my police career. So I accepted the award with 5 other people. One of them had just recently passed away, so his family was there. But it was really nice because they really go all out in the state of Florida. They display your photo with the little snippet of what you've done. It was kind of hard to put 35 years into 200 words, but they kind of do that on a plaque, and it's there in the Capitol. So as people walk by, they see it. So it was really nice ceremony. It was really nice. I got my family to go with me, so that made it special. And as you know, from being a cop, the family gets affected by their family member in law enforcement. They really take a hit, and a lot of times they don't get the acknowledgement that the cop does.
Yeah, very well said. I'm glad you're pointing that out because they serve alongside of us, right? And we put them to hell. So, man, I've always told you this offline, but I want to make sure to say it on camera. I hold you in high regards because as a young officer, we worked in the same parts of Miami-Dade. At the time, it was in the late 80s, early 90s, in an area that's called Northside District, or used to be Miami-Dade. That's now Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, right? Miami-Dade Police Department, converted to Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office. And it was a Liberty City. And great people that lived there. But unfortunately, at the time, it was a high rate of crime and violence. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about this and verbalizing. But there were many times that my life and other fellow officers' lives were in danger. And I knew that whether you were a sergeant, lieutenant, commander, or major in that district, we count on you to have our backs. And I don't think I've ever said this to you on camera, but I thank you, man, because I know that if it hadn't been for your officers, people under your command, I would not be here. We would not be talking today. So again, thank you to you, your leadership, and those people that work for you that I just can't ever thank enough. So let's talk about, this journey, 35-year journey that you started with the Miami-Dade Police Department then, or actually it was the Metro-Dade Police Department.
It was Metro-Dade Police Department when I got hired in 87. In 88, I graduated from the academy. I was sent to Northside. Back then it was called Central District. And I remember, back then when you guys were working, school board had an afternoon and midnight shift who actually were our best backups and got into the same type of stuff. When we were fighting, you guys were with us fighting. Back then, it was like having an extra squad, having you guys there with us. So we got very close to a lot of guys, the school board officers working hand in hand. This is the worst part. And you said it best. I spent almost every rank working in Northside, and then all the specialized units I worked. I supervised the Northside. I still kind of go there. I'm a board member for the Urban League of Greater Miami Emeritus. And I'm also on the board for the Embrace Girls Foundation, which is headquartered there. And I do work there now with them. But the people have always been, the vast majority of people are good. Just because you live in a high crime area doesn't mean you're a criminal. The overwhelming majority of people who live there are great people. You just have a few career criminals, a lot less now because crime peaked to 91. If you did a bar graph, sorry to go to bar graphs, I used to be a professor at FIU, but you do a bar graph like in a pyramid form, we're back down like from the 70s to now are the same. And then it peaked in 91 after the Gort bill in 95 and Evelyn Gort was killed. That made prisoners do like 85% of their sentencing. So that helped immensely getting crime down because you don't really have a lot of people waiting in the wings to be hardened criminals. So if you lock up, I don't care what city you are, hardened criminals, not some kid smoking a joint. That's you don't do that. Or somebody who may shoplift or something small. They have programs for that to redirect them. I'm talking about your repeat offenders who've lost respect for their fellow person, who do robberies and of course, all your sexual predators. The word, sexual predators should not exist. It should be called inmate. They should not be out. So those things, you go after those people, which Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, Miami-Dade Police Department has always done that. And with, the new sheriff, I had the privilege of supervising her there in Liberty City back in the 90s. She's a hell of a cop and a hell of a person. So Miami-Dade County is in good hands with her at the top. And then a lot of the people, most of the ones of the command staff, I either supervised them or trained them over the years for the assessment service. I know them all pretty well. So I could tell you, ladies and gentlemen, Miami-Dade County, you're very well off with the current command staff of the sheriff's office, which is good.
Rosie Cordero Stutz.
Yeah, yes, sir. It's Rosie's she's an outstanding street cop. The best big brass usually come from being street cops because they don't sweat the little stupid stuff and they understand, what it takes to do policing. Like too many people get caught up on, hey, Robert, when he was in school board, he had, 5 use of forces in 1 month. Well, Robert handled more calls and more violent calls and was the first one there and always got into the stuff. So you can't go by a number. You have to go by what individually did the officer do or didn't do in each situation. Or I have one of my best officers. He just had his 8th police shooting. He's not violent and he's one of the best cops. He's the most nonviolent person you'll meet, but he's always there when the first people to respond to a call, a robbery call, and you got somebody armed and they're not complying and they point a gun at you, you must take action. And some officers will say, "Oh, I've never had a use of force." Or if an officer, with more than a few years on tells you that they're not going to the hot calls, they're not doing, they're not doing their job. They're either hiding or getting their.
Yeah, let's talk about that because you have your slackers, right? And that's a small percentage, and we tend to weed those out. And I guess you pointed out my uses of force because there was one time I had a series of uses of force, and it's not violent. It was just because I was responding to incidents, as you said. But let's talk about policing in the late 80s, early 90s. Give people a perspective of how violent it was in the area that we're talking about, Liberty City, man. 18th Avenue, 15th Avenue, between 2nd Street and Northwest 72nd Street, 71st Street, excuse me. That was some rough times, man.
That area is, Miami-Dade County is divided up by grids for crime reporting. And by the county, that area is grid 863. And it's definitely one of the most violent grids. There's a lot of people packed in a small area. But again, I know like every street there, almost every house, because I used to do a thing when I was at Northside. I'd go door to door with my command staff as the major. It was called a major's night out. And I'd knock on the door, say, "Hey, is there anything we could do better? Anything that the police can do better?" And I can tell you the overwhelming.
Excuse me for jumping in.
I'm sorry.
You started that. And the county adopted it countywide.
They still use it. And it's very good because we should just wait as a police department. We're using tax money and we should be proactive. When I say proactive, it doesn't mean out there, beating everybody's heads up. We should be proactive with the community and how can we better serve, and not always because I've had to tell people it's great to have cops because people say, "Hey, we need the cops to be coaches." Well, we don't have enough cops to send them on duty to be a coach. That's what coaches are for. However, we'll come by the park to assure your kids and the coaching staff is safe. So it's things that they sometimes want us to do, thinking it's a great idea to get and sometimes we can do a little bit of it, some units, but the thing is our main job is public safety and to do it, efficiently and proactively, but professionally. That's the main thing. And I can tell you, both from my time at Miami-Dade Police Department, 31 years, they've every year strived to be better than the last year since I've been on. And I can tell you, I'm still a member of the Miami-Dade County Chiefs of Police. And it's a really great group there now. And I've been a member since well, on and off since like 2003 when I made major. And they always, each small department, whether it was South Miami or other departments, they all try to beat what they did the year before and get more professional and more, cost effective and using technology and stuff. Miami-Dade County as a whole, not just with the sheriff's office, but with also the other departments, there's about 35. They're in really good shape.
We had our riots in the 80s, the McDuffie riots. We had the Lozano riots. We had the Evelyn Johnson riots. We had a series of disturbances that we had learned from. And we were, on the people like yourself and your command, privileged to shape our policies to better fit the evolution of society, the complexities that society has, adopt our police practices to not being soft on crime, but being more friendly to the community. Can you share with the audience a little bit of that mentality?
I can tell you, Miami-Dade always wasn't as professional. You mentioned the McDuffie riots. 1980, I was junior high, but 1980, you had a riot because they chased a guy and they beat him and they tried to cover it up. And by messing up the motorcycle, when you do trash reconstruction, you can all see that. And then so they got off somehow on the trial. It started a riot. I know that was one of the catalysts before I came on for Miami-Dade to improve, monitor the officers more. They set up a lot of things where we monitor. We do like Miami-Dade does, and they still do it. They monitor, they have an early warning system they created back in the 80s. And I can tell you every year they reassess or they get better. So Miami-Dade was way ahead of most departments in professionalizing the police department. In the 80s, I think it was Bobby Jones was the director, and then Fred Taylor, who is a personal friend, he's still around. I think he's almost 90. He's like 86, 87. He did a lot from 86 to 96 to really improve the department. So by the time I came on, we were way ahead of most departments nationwide because Miami-Dade's always fluctuated between like the 6th to 8th largest department in the country. And so they still do. They constantly are having training for different things. When things come up, they're proactive to prevent. One of the reasons, like there's the standard operating procedures for Miami-Dade are so large because we have that many employees, like 30. I think it's like 3,200 sworn right now. I'm not sure the exact number. But you're going to have in policing, because the nature of the job, people screw things up, whether intentionally or malicious. It's usually by accident. They'll crash a car or do something they're not intended. So you have to create a policy sometimes to, rectify that issue that led down. A lot of times things happen because, like I'll give you an example. I have my PBA shirt on. In the PBA contract, there's a line that says there's inherent danger in police work, which that's one of the only jobs, I guess. I'm sure there's some jobs that may have that. But in the contract, there's a chance you're going to get hurt. So when you're doing that type of work, a lot of people will ask me, hey, especially like when I was at FIU, how come they didn't just ask the officer, the bad guy to drop his gun? I go, well, that's factored in. They're screaming at him, drop the gun, drop the gun. And so that's not like they didn't ask me to start shooting, but there may be occasions where you don't say drop the gun. If you're about to shoot someone, you're a bad guy, and I know that you're the bad guy and you're about to shoot someone, I'm not going to say, hey, drop the gun, I'm going to shoot you, because I got to stop you from harming that person that you have the gun on. So you're allowed to do that by law. That's as a cop. So there's things that people don't understand. Or for instance, I'm a trained fighter at 6 foot, like 260. Most officers, average size officers, can't handcuff me alone. So people say, well, they shouldn't hire. Well, we got to hire. We're going to hire everybody. And there may be a smaller officer who's a very good officer. Some of the best officers I know, I had in TNT, I had 2 of them. They both were 5 foot tall and 100 to 105 pounds, but they made more arrests and they were out there and they would not give up in a fight. So it's not necessarily the size, but I mentioned this to say, if you get a shoplifter, just say at CVS, and he's my size and he's, out of his mind and he's fighting with you, trying to take your gun, the officer's allowed to shoot him. He's unarmed. So a lot of people don't understand that. Oh, they shot an unarmed person. Well, there's a reason. I can't do it because of my size. But they're going to always look at the individual officer's fighting skills, their size, and you can't hire only officers 6 foot, 250. Yeah. It doesn't work.
Let's describe to the audience so that they get a better understanding of what they don't see on the back end, the agency side, how the agency guards the public. Because you just mentioned the early warning system. Go a little bit into that so you can provide them a better understanding.
You'll put like how many use of force every quarter they'll do it. So for instance, I'll give you an example. In like 1990, I had 7 use of forces in 3 days. I was training a rookie, so every call of a Baker Act, with Florida, that's the statute. A Baker Act call, the person usually they'll fight you. You know, sometimes you could talk them down. I one I had. It's funny because it hit me now. He bit a chunk out of my arm. I had him calm, and another officer tried to grab him, and he went crazy. He bit a chunk out of my arm. So the cops, that's when AIDS first came out in '89. I think it was even before Magic Johnson getting AIDS. So we didn't know anything about AIDS. So they poured a gallon of bleach with a Benadine brush on my arm, and they burned all my skin off. So I had to go to the Jackson Burn Center. That was actually, I'm sorry, I was at '89. In 2019, the exact spot, because I had this big white bleach spot. You can tell the texture of the skin had changed from being burned, chemical burn. And they had to create a special sleeve at the burn center for me to wear because it wouldn't heal, so I could work. Well, fast forward in 2019, I had skin cancer. I had to get surgery at the exact spot where they burned my skin off. So it's just one of those things where sometimes, well, to not have to go on a tangent on that, but the use of force thing, if you get like say 2 use of forces and I'm not sure the exact number, so don't quote me, but say it's a quarter of the year and a complaint, then they took a further look individually at each one. Because use of forces that's not a bad thing unless they're excessive use of forces. So that's what the supervisors will screen to say that Robert, is somebody saying good morning, Robert slapping him. Well, of course, we would never allow that. So it's more to take a secondary look by the command staff, not just the road supervisor, but somebody higher who's kind of removed from the individual so they can see if, hey, let me look at the reports. Let me, if I need to interview the officer to see if he or she has an issue going on, whether it's a domestic issue at home, because we all know officers are human. That's the number one thing. And I'll never forget, Rosie actually said it. Rosie was in PIO as a lieutenant, and Roger and Amanda got killed. And Rosie announced Amanda's death, and she said, "We're people too," as she was breaking up saying it. And I've used that quote, cops are people too. And people forget that. So yeah, you may have a bad day. It doesn't justify me being rude to you in a traffic stop, because I need to be completely impartial. But we know it affects sometimes if you have if you have a sick child. So we have to monitor everybody's behavior, the police departments, to see if, we're not going to fire the person because their kid has cancer, but we may remove them from the street and help them. And there's things like the POAT and the PBA Love Fund that does help those people. So a lot of times I can tell you from my experience, a lot of cops are too proud to ask for help, but there's all kinds, like Miami-Dade has had psych services. They've changed the name to health services since before I came on, and they're really, really good now. A lot of the smaller apartments don't. So that's why we created through the Day Chiefs, the officer wellness program, where we kind of had the peer counseling and stuff, which was, a Chief Landa's baby, but it's still going on. They do a really good job. So there's things out there. And the stigma, like when me and you came on, nobody wanted to admit, I'm having issues. We would, what we call a choir practice. We'd go like our Friday night, which mine back then when I was a rookie was like Tuesday night, and have beers with the guys somewhere at a park or something and kind of de-stress before you went home. We didn't realize it at the time. That was a mental health thing, coping. And then I guess once they implemented, the take-home cars, you really couldn't drink. Like you didn't do the same. And so that kind of fell by the wayside. And then even though Miami-Dade has really pushed out the officer wellness, they've done a great job for years. A lot of cops just don't partake of it. I think more do now as a percentage, but a lot of them didn't. And I know it would have saved a lot of guys back that got fired when I came on, because we did fire, believe it or not, the public, it's not hard to fire a cop. I've fired cops and I've written up plenty of people who deserved it. And it was like graduating, it's a level of discipline. It's progressive discipline. It's not, the guy says a curse word, he gets mad, you don't fire him for that. Or for,
So there is an accountability system of which Chief just mentioned. They measure actions with situation, and they determine it's not a perfect system, but it works most of the time. And it guards against, the objective here is to guard against bad officers and weed them out, right? But also at the same time, protect
it's
good officers in the community. to ensure that number one objective of safety is met. So that's a great point that you just made. You also brought up the fact that, let's face it, there's been an evolution from when we started in the 80s to current day, where at the beginning of our careers and before, there was a stigma, or actually there was a mindset, a culture. Don't complain, suck it up. We've heard that before. And we did. We internalized all that. And we saw some of our brothers and sisters fall off the wayside. But then you also brought up that over the time, leadership level, there's been a change of mindset, a recognition, if you will, a need for participation, department and administration, participation in recognizing and addressing officers' wellness. And you didn't say it, but I'm going to recognize you for this. Also, you were part of that transition. We're big in implementing the state chief's involvement in the wellness program through former Chief Renee Lambda, who was the chief. Last position he had, police work, was chief of South Miami Police Department, where you served as assistant chief. So I just wanted to bring a full summary to that. Please continue.
And another thing, like in that same topic, female officers have always had it worse because they're in a male-dominated profession. Like my little sister retired this January, 31 years, and she's mostly in robbery and RID her whole career. Never wanted to go up the ranks, and I'm better looking, but she's smarter. She would have gone higher than I did. I said that at the actual Hall of Fame, where she's a better cop than I was. So it's kind of ironic that I'm in the Hall of Fame and she isn't. But about 99, she was pregnant with my niece, and she's working RID with our mutual buddy Greenwell, who's a sergeant. And she gets into a fight. Now she's 6 months pregnant. And the policy is if you get a doctor's note that you can work, you can work. So she's very hard-headed, but I think it's more that she to maintain that toughness. And again, it is harder on female officers to maintain your toughness because they're coming, from just a different, usually smaller. She didn't want to get off the road, and she gets into a fight with a really nasty person who I've arrested down in the south end of the county. And he hit her, punched her, and she could have lost the baby.
So yeah, you're right, man. They have their responsibilities at home, right? And then they have their responsibility to have work.
No, it's just the fact that society is tougher on mothers, whether they're cops or not. So mothers sometimes never get a break. And I can tell you the example, and all the female officers I know, there's always that exception, but the vast majority, like you said, or I'd rather have a small female who's tough and is aware that some big guy, because a lot of big guys have never had a fight because they're just big, they scare people, but you hit them one time in the chin and you knock them out. And that's the bad guys know that. It's how you carry yourself. It's like a lot of times you'll see the cop and somebody goes, they should be more friendly. No, they're carrying themselves that way because of the nature of the job. They can't just be they should be professional, but they're not going to be screwing around, high-fiving you because they don't know you. And we can't judge a book by the cover. Like on a traffic stop, I'll give you an example. I've had people, small little people that have had guns and they told me later, hey, we're thinking of shooting you to get away because they had warrants. And you look at them, they looked harmless. And other people who may have looked, scary, were the nicest people in the world. So you can never judge a book by the cover. You judge people by their actions, like cops. And I'll give you another thing, from my female cops. One of the best female cops I ever worked with, one of the best cops, period, not female, was Amanda Hallworth, who got killed. And by no fault of her own, killed all I do with Roger Castillo. When I was telling her mom this after the funeral, when she was a rookie, I only had a few months ahead of her, a year more. She calls for an emergency backup at 3:15, and I get there, and she has this giant guy, bigger than me, 6'5", 6'6", 300 pounds, on top of the car, like a deer, like she'd shot a deer. So we look at her what the hell did you call the backup for? To help him? You don't need any help. And she had she had a beautiful smile, a little smile. But it's you need to definitely train. Every cop who's not training should be training, because most of the time you don't get into fights. But if you get in a fight for your gun, you better be able to hold on until your backup gets there. And if you're trying to handcuff someone who's fighting, who says, hey, I'm going to take your gun and I'm going to kill you, they're telling you this. So that's why sometimes you'll hear that an unarmed person got shot. It's totally good shooting. You can shoot an unarmed person like that in that scenario. I can't because of my size, but a smaller officer can. And it depends on the multitude of factors. And the state attorney always weighs that, as does the FDLE when they do investigate a shooting.
Let's switch it up. We've been talking to the public. Let's talk to our fellow cops, right? Our fellow first responders. From your perspective, what advice can you give these young officers that are out there?
Ask me that. I wrote an article for the PBA magazine and it was very well received. I put it on my LinkedIn too. It was like, don't take things personal. And I was lucky. Somebody told me that when I was a rookie. And they said, hey, don't take nothing personal. So when I got to work, I didn't take nothing personal. He threw rocks and you were there. We got routinely got rocked and bottled in the housing projects. Routinely got, cursed at. They would play the song F the Police by NWA like all the time. I never took it personal, thank God. But what I did take personal, on my way to work, somebody would cut me off, which is stupid. I don't know why. I was very immature. I was like 22, 23. It didn't take me till years later to take nothing personal off duty either. But for the grace of God, I've done something stupid because you can't let your anger cloud your judgment. At work, I never did. So I think I had one complaint in 35 years, and the complaint was BS because everybody that was on the scene, got complained on. But I never had like a personal complaint where somebody said, because I never took it personal. People have cursed at me. They've thanked me later. Or I've had fights with people and I shook their hand after and bought them, Burger King on the way to jail because, everybody has their issues. But there's new people, you can't take things personal. If you do, you're not going to last a long time. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to let the anger overtake your action. And you have a lot of power. You have more power in the individual civil liberties than the president of the United States does as a cop. So, do you really want somebody 19, a hothead, being a cop, or 20, 21? You need to vet the people when you hire them, and you need to train them, and need to constantly, one of the big things is ongoing training, but you can't take things personal.
So let's talk about leadership. For those officers that want to rise the ranks that you excel to, what's your advice?
I mean, I would say they have it easier than we did, in the sense that if you work really hard, don't worry what your peers doing. Like I got criticized because I always had the most arrests, most tickets, most this and that. And some of the guys, hey, you're making us look bad. I go, I just worked. I didn't worry what the other people did. And if you work hard, units will recruit you and do good reports, write good reports, work hard. Don't worry. Well, so-and-so only handled one call and I got 5 so far. Then take the 6th one. It'll pay off in the end to like you got to look at any police department. It's kind of like a franchise. Like just say, I'm not comparing us to McDonald's, but just say you're a franchisee of a larger corporation. So say you're Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, you're a new officer. You represent your name and that badge. And you should do it the best of your ability, especially, if you're not going to respect the badge and the department, respect your family name and make that name the most professional. So when people come in, I was very proud because after the Hall of Fame, several, including my sister, put it on Facebook. So people were sending me comments, copies, screenshots of comments from people responding. And so I guess an officer from Northside wrote on one of them, Nanney's name is still known, in Liberty City. I asked when Nanney was here, one of the people in the housing projects asked, when he was here, he was a really good major. I've been gone almost 20 years. So that to me, it meant a lot because I tried to, both get my officers. I worked there almost every rank but captain. So I knew the area inside out. It wasn't that big of an area. And so I wanted all my officers to be like I was. Don't take things personal. Be professional. Our job is to help people. On occasion, and not every day, you got to arrest bad people, which is good because you should be a guardian and protector of the people in your area. And always look to how to improve, because I would think of things back, like when I was an officer, I always thought, because they didn't have CompStat, we didn't have a way to like show crime trends. So they would just put out bolos, but the better detectives would come to roll calls and would do stuff. So I always tried to, my whole career, no matter what rank, improve things. I got to do a lot of, things to be more efficient. Like, for instance, we would do narcotic reverse stings. We'd initially arrest all the sellers. But what we know from statistics and from intel, like almost every one of your people who sells drugs, they have a robbery past. They're diversified in making their money. So if you target them, so it's very hard for me to find, Joe Blow who's going to do a robbery and he's in grid 863 or whatever grid. But I know that he sells drugs on this corner at this time. I can arrest him for a different felony. So I'm getting him off the street. And if it's in 1,000 feet of a school, he does a 3-year minimum, which is a good thing because you do not want that person who does robberies and selling drugs and has a gun around kids walking home from school. So a lot of people say, oh, no, but that's a good way to do it. So you work smarter to get the worst criminals off the street. And you do that by trying to improve everything you do. So these young people don't take things personal and try to make yourself, be the best. And as a supervisor up and coming, you got to take care of your people.
We have been speaking with retired Police Chief Charles Nanney, worked for the Miami-Dade Police Department, started out in Metro-Dade, Miami-Dade Police Department. Today, it's the Sheriff's Office, Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office. From the Sheriff's Office or the Miami-Dade Police Department, he went on to work at South Miami Police Department as their Assistant Chief. He is an integral part of the leadership team at Miami-Dade PDA, also Miami-Dade Chiefs Association of Police Chiefs, and our overall national police community. To the Millers, Mike Miller, thank you, the community news team, our producer, Alejandro Sukas, behind the scenes, producing our show today. We thank you and you, the audience. Look forward to speaking with you next time. You can catch us on all podcast platforms, at least major ones, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Amazon, YouTube, or that's inbadges.com channel or website, as well as the Miami's community. Look forward to speaking with you next time. Thank you.